Hey guys, this is John, and I'm playing dsavv in the 15-minute pool in ICC. dsavv is from Greece, and he has a 1733 rating. And let's check his stats. Um, Standard rating of, or standard peak rating of, wait, I'm not looking at standard, I'm looking at 15-minute. Peak rating there of 2021. Almost 12,000 games played, wow. I'm just pausing here because I'm deciding if I want to go for a King's Gambit. Oh man. Let's do it. All right. Let's put that 2339 rating to work a little bit. We'll make it interesting. All right. So there's two ways to play this, bishop c4 or knight f3. I have a student who's very fond of the bishop c4 line. So in honor of him, I will play bishop c4. Knight f3, there is more theory though.
Check.
Queen h4. Okay, so he's going to push my king to f1. As far as I know, this is like perfectly fine for white if this happens. I mean, that is, white does not mind the king having to move again because black's queen will have to move too. So compared to the Queen's Gambit, the King's Gambit has always been regarded as being a much riskier opening, at least since like the year 1900 or so. The Queen's Gambit is kind of a misnomer because it's not a real gambit. I mean, the pawn can almost always be regained, whereas the King's Gambit, like you really are gambiting a pawn. It's like, it's a true gambit. So d6, I think knight f3 is perfectly good. I can play d4 to start if I want. Let's just play knight f3 and see where he puts his queen. I mean, in a g15 game, the King's Gambit is like perfectly playable. Over the board, I would not play this gambit hardly ever. Certainly not against very high-rated opposition because probably the best white can do is equalize. But against other opponents, lower levels, and also faster time controls, it's perfectly fine. Plus, I have too many like Roy Lopez's and stuff on my channel as it is. So let's get something interesting going. Queen g4. Seems like an odd square for the queen. I almost have bishop takes f7. It'd be nice if I did. Bishop takes f7, king takes f7, knight e5 with the fork, but of course he just plays d takes e5. So what is the point of having the queen on g4? It just looks awkward there. I mean, maybe they just want to stay guarding this pawn. I think I'll play knight c3 and just look to play like knight d5 or knight b5. I can play d4 whenever I want, so this is fine. Another opening I have to remember to play is the Ponziani for my student Justin. Justin, if you're out there, I'm working on it. I thought about playing the Ponziani this time, but there was something enticing about the King's Gambit. And it's Friday, too. You guys will be watching this on a Saturday, but it's Friday. Let's have a little fun. So what can black think about playing here? I mean, knight c6 or pawn c6 are probably the most obvious moves. Pawn c6 keeps my knight out of b5 and d5, but it costs time. I think I'll just play d4 then. So, okay, they play knight f6. I could go knight b5, but I guess knight a6 is a good way to counter that. I could play e5 here. Point of that being that if d takes e5, then bishop takes f7 check is working. The other thing I'm wondering is if e5, d takes e5, bishop takes f7 check, if black can just play, I don't know, king e7, let's say. And it's kind of a weird position because they can't take my bishop, but I also can't take the pawn on e5 unless I'm doing it with check. Well, actually, that's not true. I could because my queen is defended on d1. Yeah, maybe e5 is the move. Could be. I could also just play d4, which strengthens the threat of e5, and is also just a good developing move. Yeah, let's play d4. I won't make a decision about the e5 move quite yet. See if I can get them to play like bishop e7 maybe. I'm trying to think of any top-level Grandmasters who play the King's Gambit. I know another YouTuber, Nicholas Huschenbett, the German Grandmaster. He plays the King's Gambit from time to time. You can find some King's Gambits on his channel. Also, there's this Grandmaster Fedorchuk who used to play it. I haven't really seen any King's Gambit games of his lately, but I know he used to dabble in that, and he would play it at a very high level too, like against other Grandmasters. Probably Nakamura has played it because Nakamura has played everything. But you know, this is not an opening that you're going to do well, like having as your main repertoire for most players. It's a little too risky for that. I would stick to like a Roy Lopez or a Joko Piano, that sort of thing. Okay, so g5. I could undermine with h4, but that would weaken my g3 square. So like knight h5, for instance. So I'm thinking e5 is the way to go in this position. Yeah, and if this knight gets pushed away, I can play knight d5 potentially. So let's go ahead and play this. The fact that black is so far behind in development is one of the main reasons that King's Gambit players like this opening. You know, they can point to black's backward development, and also the fact that supporting the pawn on f4 often requires a lot of awkward moves like g5. They can point to that and view that as compensation for the pawn, and rightly so. So here, if d takes e5, I will play bishop takes f7 check. I think he might see that tactic, so he's maybe a little hesitant to take the pawn. Even d takes e5 is probably pretty good for me. The nice thing is if this knight moves, this knight d5 move is on the horizon. Then I'd hit c7. f6 is also kind of weak. So I think he might have tactical troubles pretty soon. Probably knight h5 is the best move. So let me just start thinking about what I plan to do against that one. Okay, plays knight d7. So the queen is now undefended. Be nice to make bishop takes f7 work. Bishop takes f7, king takes f7, e6 check. Is that possible? Queen takes e6, knight takes g5 would fork the king and the queen. But they could play king takes e6. I don't think that's quite working for us. Queen e2 looks pretty good right now. Just lining up with their king. h4 also looks pretty good as an undermining move. If pawn takes, then rook takes h4. There's so many options. So many tempting options. I think queen e2, probably. Yeah, let's do that. So if bishop e7, I'll take on d6. And bishop takes d6 would be illegal then. So c takes d6, and I think knight d5 is just crushing. Attacking the pinned bishop, also threatening knight c7 check with the fork on the king and the rook. He could take on e5 maybe. Unfortunately then, bishop takes f7 does not work. He does take. I mean, I think just d takes is a good reply, but it'd be nice if there was something even better. No, let's just take back. We're still threatening to barrel down with e6. If he moves this knight, like knight c5, again, knight d5 is crushing. Knight b6 maybe is the best move. Yep. Knight e4 I could play, threatening to come into f6. That also threatens g5 too. Ooh, I like the look of that. Yeah, knight e4 is a good move. Let's play it. I knew this knight was going to come in handy at some point, either coming to b5, d5, or now this e4 square. If bishop e7 trying to cover f6, then just knight f6 check, bishop takes f6, e takes f6, and he's pinned. So we win material. Bishop g7, I'll probably do the same thing. Knight check. Although in that case, bishop g7, knight f6 check, bishop takes f6, e takes f6, bishop e6. Black might be able to survive there. Yeah, this move should lose pretty quick, I think. Oh, wait, no. I hallucinated for a second. Knight f6 check, bishop takes f6, e takes f6. That bishop is gone. So there's nothing that I would be pinning there. That's a weird hallucination. I could play knight d6 check if I wanted. We could do that. Just not quite sure. Bishop back to b3. I kind of want to keep my light square bishop. So knight takes c4 is a move that I would like to disallow if I could. But bishop b3 is rather slow. What if h3? Kicking the queen. Then if queen h5, then knight f6 check is strong. That looks nearly winning. So h3, queen f5, let's say. Knight d6 check. C takes d6. E takes d6. That's okay, but nothing crazy. Crazy good for us. h3, queen f5, knight d4, they have queen takes e5, sadly. I feel like their next move might be bishop e6 if I drop the bishop back to b3. Just seems like they're gearing up for that move. What about a forcing line? Knight f6 check, bishop takes f6, e takes f6, bishop e6, bishop takes e6. If f takes e6, then f7 check is possible. Maybe with some advantage. So let's say instead, going back over that line, knight f6 check, bishop takes f6, e takes f6, bishop e6, bishop takes e6, queen takes e6, queen takes e6, f takes e6, knight takes g5. Then my f6 pawn survives. I'm hitting f4. Might be good for some advantage. The downside is that's forcing and I don't really win anything. I win a pawn back. But I kind of want more here. In that line, knight f6 check, bishop takes f6, e takes f6, bishop e6, bishop takes e6, queen takes e6. I could also just play knight takes g5 directly. Maybe that's better. Queen takes e2, king takes e2, because then the f pawn is likely to survive, and I can play like bishop takes f4 soon if I get a chance. Yeah, I think I've thought for long enough here. Let's just go for this line. I hate to simplify the game like this, but like I said, I'm winning a pawn back. Didn't see too many other incredibly promising ways to proceed. He must take on f6 here. And after that, he must play bishop e6. King d8 or king f8 is going to lose to queen e7. Ah, there's another line too. Okay, this one's just crossing my mind now as well. So bishop takes f6, e takes f6, bishop e6. I can play h3 and hit the queen. Then if he just resigned? Really? What? Does he miss something? I'm missing something that I'm not seeing, or am I missing something that he's seeing? So if take,
Check.
bishop e6, what's the big deal? I mean, okay, so I was calculating this line. Queen takes, and then knight takes g5. Queen
Check.
takes e2, king takes e2, but certainly this is not resignable for him. Far from it. Also, I was looking at the
Check.
line here and then h3, hoping for queen f5, knight d4 maybe. Hitting the queen, hitting e6. This is a potentially tempting line. But after h3, I wonder if he can even like castle, for instance. Because if I take the queen, then bishop takes c4 skewers me. Let's go back and have a look at it. So King's Gambit accepted, and bishop c4. As I said, knight f3 is the more popular move, but bishop c4 has always enjoyed some measure of popularity as well. I think black should refrain from queen h4. I know the engine says it's the best move, and it does displace white's king, but somehow I just don't really trust that move. I think black would be better off focusing on development. You know, sometimes it's even decent for black to play d5 and give back a pawn to open lines. For instance, like bishop takes d5, knight here, attacking the bishop and hitting the pawn too. Approaches like that are not bad against the King's Gambit.
Check.
So check, king f1. I'm not going to pretend I know the theory, though, on this line, because I really don't. I know some like main ideas, but that's it. Queen g4. This also looks suspicious. So I just played knight c3. The computer wants me to play d4, prefers that a bit. But knight c3, knight f6. Now I play d4, and g5. Okay, now e5. So yeah, g5 was probably pushing it. I'm not threatening this f4 pawn yet, so I don't think black can afford another pawn move themselves. So g5, I played e5, knight f d7, queen e2. So according to the computer, queen to e1 would be better, x-raying the king. That way there's no pin going on. Why is that so much better? So if take, so I can take it with the knight. Yeah, with my queen on e2, they were meeting knight takes e5 with queen takes e2 check. But here, we're hitting the queen, also hitting the knight on d7. If they take the knight, queen takes e5, attacking the rook. Yeah, we're winning material. That did cross my mind like very briefly after I played queen e2, like maybe queen e1 is better. So queen e2, d takes e5, and I just took back. Yeah, h4, again, this h4 move you see. It's a good way to break up the pawns because if h6, we can just take, amongst other things, because now there's a pin on the h-file. So he played d takes e5. I took back, knight b6. I went knight e4. h3, also a good move. That way, if queen f5, I can play bishop d3 with tempo. Yeah, makes sense. And if h3, queen h5, still knight e4. And black's queen has been pushed to maybe even a more passive role on the side of the board. So knight e4, bishop e7.
Check.
I gave a check and they just resigned. Yeah, not sure why. It's +1, but let's look at the main line. Bishop takes, pawn takes, bishop e6. Yep, bishop takes e6, queen takes e6, knight takes g5, queen takes e2, king takes e2, rook g8, knight takes h7. What if rook takes g2, king f3? I guess I'm going to take here. Black's king is kind of stuck in the open. This f6 pawn is useful, and I'll have a passed h pawn. But yeah, certainly that position was very far from resignable for black. I don't know what they missed. Maybe they just missed bishop e6. Maybe they thought they had to move king d8 or king f8, both of which will get squashed by queen e7. So, hard to say. Okay, well, short game, but you know, good to introduce variety
Check.
to the channel, especially gambits and sharper lines too, because I do have positional leanings, so it's nice to push myself and get some different types of positions out there. That's how you get better. You play positions outside of your comfort zone. So hope you guys enjoyed this one. I'll be back tomorrow with another standard video. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.